Hello, my icebergs. Thank you for clicking on the thumbnail and welcome to the Iceberg Show with Saurabh Puranik, a place to find your inspiration. Please wait, I want to save your time. So check the description box and see the interesting questions I ask in this interview. You can watch those questions that solve your problem, or you can watch those questions that will give you a different perspective in life. So, guys, spend some time to save your time. Let's grow together. Our today's guest is Sushma Rajagopalan ma'am, a global leader, a venture capitalist, a mentor, and the former CEO of ITC Infotech, a fully owned subsidiary of ITC Limited. She has a track record of growing and transforming companies. She is known to have a strong strategic orientation and entrepreneurial mindset. She has held C-level roles in many companies like iGet, Zensar Technologies, Liquid Hub, L&T Infotech, and started her career with CMC and Citibank in India. Now in this episode, we will uncover her journey as a startup investor, mentor, entrepreneur, and insight about entrepreneurship. So enjoy this episode and comment your learnings. Let's grow together. Thank you, Sushma ma'am, for joining again on the Iceberg Show with Saurabh Puranik.
Hey Saurabh, good to be back with you again.
In your previous episode, you shared different aspects of your life, struggles of being a CEO, and how experience from different domains help you to build a foundation for becoming a CEO. Now, in this episode, we will uncover your journey as a startup investor, mentor, and insights about entrepreneurship. So, ma'am, you are venture partner with Rittenhouse Venture. So, could you please share about your contribution to startup ecosystem and your love for startups?
So yeah, very interesting question. And I must say that my interest in startups and venture development started way back in life, actually. Okay. And I'm almost going back 15, 20 years when I was fortunate to be associated with a venture development organization in the state of Pennsylvania, both in Pittsburgh as well as in Philadelphia. It's the Ben Franklin system of companies, Ben Franklin system of venture development, where the state actually provides money for entrepreneurial activity. And my association with them was one of the primary reasons I got interested in the world of startups. And then I was a CEO of a startup out of Carnegie Mellon as well. So these were two big contributors, but then life happens, and then I went and worked for relatively larger organizations. But my interest in startup ecosystem has been seeded from a very long time. So when I came back to the US early 2019, I was evaluating, what I really want to do for the next 15, 20 years of my life. And I said, the world of ventures with technology changing, with disruption galore, and there are more entrepreneurs who are coming out that are young people who, have the courage and have the means to sort of go out and start new ventures. I said, well, I can contribute in several different ways. One, as you rightly put, I am a venture partner with Rittenhouse Ventures, and we invest in companies that have shown some revenue traction, a couple of $1 million, and we invest with them. But I wear a mentor and a coach hat with various different organizations which span India as well as in the northern eastern seaboard. So I'm a mentor with Harvard's iLabs, which is a very interesting journey. I'm a mentor and a coach with PACT. I sit on advisory boards of companies. I'm also a small investor in some of the companies, and then notable among them are, I hold board positions in startup companies like, I'll name some of them. There's a New Jersey company called Powerfluence, which is, is focusing on Salesforce and MuleSoft. So, straight up my alley from a technology consulting standpoint. There's a very interesting digital agency and a customer experience agency called O3 in Philadelphia. A fascinating experience with them, guiding them to get to the next stage. There's a classic traditional Indo-US model out of the Valley and Ahmedabad called Krish CompuSoft that focuses largely on retail, utility and energy, and manufacturing. And all of these are in different phases of their life cycle and their growth. And being able to tangibly make a difference to them. There's also an impact sourcing organization out of Udaipur that I'm guiding. But what is very exhilarating is, being able to tangibly make a difference to these companies. For the CEOs of these companies who have already taken, the step forward to build their organization, to be able to enable them to de-risk themselves in some way, to minimize some of the failures that failure is a part of business. But if you can help companies sort of minimize some of that, I think that's a great contribution. So I am finding this journey as a venture capitalist, venture creator, venture mentor, and a coach. I mean, I'm finding this very fulfilling at the moment.
Excellent, ma'am. And we need people like you in the startup ecosystem that will empower us and in order to make an impact on the society as well.
You're right. Every venture eventually creates jobs, right? And every venture need not create millions in wealth, but definitely it's a path towards wealth creation. So it's very fulfilling. But each of these ventures I'm in are in completely different stages. So I'm a mentor with an organization in Bangalore called OneCrowd, which actually invests in very, very early stage, companies, and so does Ben Franklin. So I get to see the whole continuum, and it's the immense satisfaction of actually growing something and growing something ground up. So it's very fulfilling to me.
That's great,
ma'am. And hopefully to everyone that I support. Yeah.
That's great, ma'am. Ma'am, I would like to ask you a biggest question that every entrepreneur faces. Like how to pick an idea to work upon amongst few shortlisted ideas.
So either as an entrepreneur or as an investor, I'm a big believer in focus. Okay? You can't be everything to everyone. Your solutions have to be tailor-made for one segment of the market. Now, I'm not saying that your solution shouldn't be replicable to other markets. You should pick an idea where you can start with a niche, but then you can translate that to other areas. But to get going, I think you should be extraordinarily focused. So for instance, as a venture partner, as a venture capitalist, at Rittenhouse Ventures, we are very focused on only tech investments. Okay? And within tech investments, we do a disproportionate amount in health tech, in edutech, HR tech, and fintech. And the stage at which we operate. So we don't put money into companies which are very early, which haven't proven the concept, or we don't put money into very, very large companies, so we are very focused. We are pre-Series A or Series A. So it comes down to focus. Now, as an entrepreneur, obviously, your solution has to do one of two things. It has to either disrupt an existing solution in the market by doing things better, faster, cheaper, or it should really be exploiting a gap that might exist, that people have not filled. So I would say these would be the two very basic mantras of, how you go about focusing on where exactly your company will sort of bridge the gap or meet the needs that exist in the market.
Okay, so basically we need focus, and we need to offer a solution to a problem which is like a pain point for the society, and we can bridge this gap, and that will be a scalable model as well as that will a investable model as well. Is that
exactly
correct?
Exactly, absolutely. So in fact, when people ask me what are digital ideas, that people should be investing in, I basically tell them that digital is fundamentally using technology to enhance people's experience or to drive efficiency. Okay, now most of the businesses that you see today are digital businesses, but it comes with obviously use of technology, but also great understanding of a particular market or a particular industry. It precedes, you need to have deep domain in order to be able to fill those gaps, which are very essential. So it's grounded in your knowledge and understanding of a particular industry, and also the use of technology.
Okay, that's great, ma'am. During the startup journey, if we change our idea or adapt to a different idea, we may not resonate with it, and we start losing our interest. So my question is, how to be reasonably flexible as an entrepreneur?
See, what makes you an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur is an individual who is willing to take a chance. Okay? So failure is as much a probability as success, right? So I won't dwell too much on the fact that, an idea may succeed, it may not succeed, but what makes you an entrepreneur is the willingness to take the chance. But having decided to take a chance and having reacted to the conviction that you don't want a boss in life, okay, that's what drives you to be an entrepreneur in the first place. How do you minimize failure and how do you maximize success? Okay. In minimizing failure, you can have, resounding set of people. You surround yourself with the right kind of advisors. You could have a board. All of that, helps you from minimizing failure. But you raise a very important point about changing market trends, right? So one of the biggest things that I have learned, either as a leader or as an entrepreneur, is to keep your eye on the market. If you lose the eye on the market, right, the world will change right in front of you and you'd be left lagging behind. But that doesn't mean you keep changing. You can't have an avatar for your business every year, okay? You need to have a strategy, you need to have a focus, you need to be committed to solving a particular problem. But in trying to solve that, you have to know that there may be multiple ways in which you can solve a problem. And that is rooted on how the market changes and how the market behaves. You can pivot very quickly from your model. But if you do that, you need to carry your investors, you have to carry your customers, and you have to carry your employees. You need to know what comes with pivoting. Okay? Most investors like entrepreneurs who are agile enough to figure out how to steer their business to capitalize on a new emerging trend. Okay? But at the same time, you don't want a schizophrenic entrepreneur who tries to go after 5 different things just because it's the flavor of the day. So it's a balance that you have to strike to say, how am I going to steer my organization such that I stay relevant? And how do I make money while staying relevant? So these would be the 2 questions. So, I use a simple mantra to scale companies, and which is, you're always looking for what are the ways to scale. but you need to be relevant, and I call this the future readiness quotient. Then, of course, you have to be profitable, and you have to have an institutional a framework in terms of improving processes, etc. But I want to focus on this future readiness bucket. The future readiness bucket is your solution going to be relevant 2 years down the road? Is it going to be relevant 5 years down the road? How is it going to change 5 years down the road? So you have to take into account the competitiveness, you have to take into account the trends in the marketplace, and particularly the people or things that can disrupt your business model.
Okay.
To be focused on a market segment or a geographical market is a function of the demand. It's a function of how exactly you can go around proving your concept, right? And of course, you have a choice. You can say, well, am I going to start with the biggest market? Am I going to start with the biggest industry vertical where my solution is going to be ready, is going to be needed? I would say that most successful leaders or entrepreneurs say, well, let me take my solution and try it in a finite segment. They wouldn't not automatically go for the largest, but they would go for a segment where the need is the highest, okay? And if they can prove the concept there, then everything else becomes, very, very easy and simple. And replicating it is simple. But where I disagree with you is that the strategy of focusing on a market is not from it's not from the standpoint of saying, well, if I fail here, I'll go there. I think that's the wrong way to approach business.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. That is, I feel that the job of a founder is similar to the chef. Like a chef, he picked those ingredients and resources to make a delicious dish. But now it's up to him or her how she will make that delicious dish and serve the people. So, as a founder, what approach we should follow in order to make great organization? So, can you please talk about that?
You've asked me a very interesting question because one of the things that I do watch is these cooking shows. They are very interesting, and some of the ones that I watch are, MasterChef, Chop, the Great British Baking Show. And there is some enormous amount of learning that I have gotten from these shows, other than, of course, cooking a decent meal. But there were two particular things that have struck me, okay, which has relevance in the world of business. Most winning ideas, most winning dishes are simple, okay? And the second biggest thing is perfection in execution. When the judges comment on your dish, they talk about getting the taste of each of these ingredients, cooking each and every ingredient to perfection, ensuring that they all come together. Most of these chefs critique that individually everything on the plate may taste very good, but somehow they don't come together. So business is like that as well, right? You have to do everything to perfection, but it has to harmonize. So the lessons I would distill from this into business are two. One is simplicity of your idea. And simplicity is also based on clarity. Okay, if you have clarity of thinking, you can make everything very simple for everybody. Okay, even the complex of things can become simple. So simplicity and perfection in execution are the two things that I would sort of pick. Of course, you need to have strategy. Of course, you need to have all of those things. But if I have learned two things, it's these. Okay, simplicity and perfection in execution.
That's
I love
great.
this question, by the way.
That's great, like learning. So, but how does an entrepreneur find the courage to go on his own when there is a probability of failure is very high? So, how an entrepreneur can find a courage?
See, a lot of times entrepreneurs inherently are driven by the fact that they don't want a boss, okay? Or they are driven by the fact that they have ideas, okay, and they have to try out these ideas, or they are people who have very, very strong convictions about something, okay. So you look at every successful entrepreneur who's out there, they've all started with the conviction to change the world, to do things differently. Inherent in this is an acceptance that I could fail. And you find that largely in most entrepreneurs, saying, hey, I'm going to try this, but I could fail. 9 out of 10 times what happens is people, if they fail, they sort of say, well, how can I pivot myself again very quickly? Okay. And the thinking is, understand what could be the various things that could go wrong, but you can't solve for everything. I mean, this is not a perfect equation that you sort of, solve, but having the recognition that, 2 or 3 things could be the major contributors to my success or failure. Understanding that. Is it going to be market acceptance? Is it going to be, how much I pump into making my technology the best technology on the face of the earth? Am I going to be ahead of my competition? Or am I just going to follow competition? Am I going to be a fast follower? Having clarity on what could be the problems that could cause failure. I'm not saying that you should have solutions for all of it, but knowing where the curveball could come from, knowing where the biggest challenge could be, is, I think, very essential for an entrepreneur. What do we ask for? I mean, as an investor, when we invest, we put down, okay, here are the 2 biggest assumptions that I am making before I actually invest in this company. And of course, we go out and test these assumptions, and we talk to experts. We talk to people who have been in that market. And same things apply for an entrepreneur as well.
Okay. But ma'am, how to reduce the chances of business failure? How to evaluate those factors which may fail your business? So how to do that?
I've said this, but I'm going to repeat this in multiple ways, okay? Number 1, have experts. Know that you don't know everything, okay? Start with that fundamental premise that for every 5 things that you know, there could be 5 things you do not know, all right? But there could be 5 other people who actually know, right? So a part of an entrepreneur, a leader, and even a venture capitalist is to have a body of experts, okay? And tapping them for their knowledge and wisdom. Of course, they are not going to make the decision for you. You have to still make the decision, right? But in making a decision, if you take a considered approach. And the second biggest thing is time, because as an entrepreneur, you don't have the time, because the world and the world of business, everything is moving at a tremendously fast pace, right? So you need to be able to do these things, literally, and the world of an entrepreneur is 24/7. The world of a venture capitalist is 24/7, because you don't know where the next idea could come from, you don't know where the next challenge could come from. So I think it is very important to do things, have an eye on the ball, okay? Nobody has a crystal ball, but you have to study trends. You have to have a market thesis, you have to have a view on, you have to fundamentally have a view as to what could disrupt and what could give impetus to your business.
Ma'am, even after evaluating failure factors, we may fail. So in that situation, how to recover from it quickly and how to bounce back?
See, this is fundamentally down to every individual. There are some people who are very adept at just bouncing back. And there are some people who don't, okay? But what I have learned, okay, and a very, very personal story, is to be able to learn from your mistake and to make sure you don't repeat the same mistake. You will make other mistakes, okay? But as long as you don't repeat the same mistake, you have to have the resilience to figure out how else you can contribute, what else can you do. And the second thing is constant learning. You have to keep updating yourself, okay? So we live in this, we change avatars, right? So like that, I think you just have to keep, infusing knowledge modules to yourself and coming up with what next. That what next is a question. But of course, as I said in the beginning, a lot depends on the DNA of the people, okay? But generically speaking, I think two things. Ask yourself what next, and what have I learned from this mistake? And how will I ensure that I don't repeat the same mistake?
Okay. So that ultimately comes to the character of an entrepreneur and how he can recover it from it and how he can learn from that situation. And if he quickly run from that situation, from that mistakes, he can definitely take a benefit out of that. But
it also depends on when you want to call it quits. Okay. So as an entrepreneur and a leader, you need to be able to pull the plug on something, saying, hey, I've tried this as much as I can. It's time for me to pivot to something else. And I'm throwing good money after bad. That's a critical decision-making capability you need to have. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs and good leaders have that.
That's true, ma'am. And I think that's essential characteristics of an entrepreneur. Yeah. So, yes. But ma'am, according to you, what is more crucial? That is a brilliant idea with an average execution or an average idea with a brilliant execution? And why you think that in the either way?
See, obviously, I'd like to have my cake and eat it too. So a brilliant idea with brilliant execution will trump any day. But a brilliant idea with poor execution goes nowhere. Just remains a brilliant idea. Whereas sometimes even an also ran idea with brilliant execution can get you somewhere. Okay? So if I have to choose, I would choose brilliant execution over brilliant idea any day.
Okay.
Because even for a brilliant idea to see the light of day, you need brilliant execution. It's like love and marriage, okay? You need both. You need great strategy, you have to have great execution. But if you force me and say choose one, I would choose brilliant execution.
But can you share any of the example where you saw that it's an average idea or it's a repeated idea or a copycat idea, but with a brilliant execution? Can you share any of this example which you encounter?
You see this in the world of business every day, right? Take Amazon for instance, right? Look at the number of very successful Amazon-like models which are coming up in India today. They're all fast follower models, right? They didn't disrupt the market, but they know that somebody else has done it and people have very quickly pivoted to the whole model of e-commerce. So I think e-commerce is a proof in itself. IT industry, look at the IT industry, okay? There are the behemoths, but is that stopping a young entrepreneur who is starting? And there are millions of these companies who are coming up, and I'm sitting on the boards of at least 2 of them, right? People are coming out and saying, oh, it's all right. Aren't there other Salesforce integrators? Of course there are. But I will commit it because I know that with my automation capabilities, with my ability to hire the right people, I can absolutely make this $100 million business.
Okay.
So if you look at the IT services industry, okay, it's full of examples of newer, and there are newer services companies that are starting up every day, but they are specialized. They are trying to infuse automation in whatever that they do, and extreme focus.
Okay, that's true, ma'am. Ma'am, let's talk about the capital requirement, and it's an essential factor for any startup. But so, ma'am, how to identify our capital requirement and how to raise that money, the future requirements of the capital as well. So, how to identify those factors of capital requirement?
Right. So capital is a function of the kind of industry you're into, right? So if you're in drug discovery, okay, you will require, the amount of capital that you require is extraordinarily high. If you're starting a services consulting business, you can do that on the back of a credit card if you can manage the cash flows right. You may not need infusion of cash at all. I'm going to pick an average sort of not average. I'm going to pick an industry like technology services and technology-led and technology services. By and large, investors like us, we believe in capital efficiency. Okay, capital efficiency is being able to take money and hit a significant milestone. For me, the rule of thumb is that whatever money you raise should give you an 18 to 24 month leeway to hit the next stage. And I look for, and that's what I look for, saying, well, if I were to give $1.5 million to this company, how long can they run? And at the end of an 18-month period, would they have hit a significant milestone? And that significant milestone is, would they have had a quantum leap in their revenues? Would they have proven their concept beyond a shadow of doubt? Would they have, 10 pilot customers? So you can throw multiple key measurable parameters, okay? And then say, well, if it'll give them that comfortable leeway of about 18 to 24 months, then the money that I've put in is good enough. Okay, and usually when we invest, we take that 18-month rule and also factor a 20% for an extra cushion, because life doesn't, it's not clockwork. So you need to give the company a little bit of a wiggle room, all right? So, but rule of thumb is this 18 to 24 months with about 20 to 30% buffer built into it.
Okay. But ma'am, how do investors determine the valuation of startup while raising funds? Because that's an important factor. Because we as an entrepreneur, we think that our valuation is like much greater than the valuation quoted by an investor. So how do the investor determine the valuation?
See, valuation is very relative. Okay. Like beauty lies in the eye of the beholder, valuation also lies in the eyes of the beholder. You could be a strategic investor. A strategic investor is saying, well, either an investor or an acquirer. Strategic buyers go and give a little bit more than a non-strategic investor, because they can assess the value of synergy, okay, to their business, saying not only is this business important, but if I combine this business with mine, then I would get a lot more benefit from that. So venture is also like that. If you invest in a company and it has ramifications on some of your other portfolio, you might be willing to give a notch more to that value. So valuation is never the same across 5 different investors. So to me, what I can do with that particular investment would be very different from what you could do with it. I could do things because I may have a synergistic company in my portfolio. You may not have that. Okay, so that's point number one. So it is relative. But having said that, by and large, in at least the tech field today, it's all a sales multiple. Okay. And you know, and it's also a question of assessing what is the kind of return I want for this. Some ventures want to only invest in things that will give them 10x or 20x returns. By and large, most investors are saying, well, different companies in my portfolio could give me different kinds of returns. Okay, I might hit bumper. There could be one particular a portfolio company that could be my next unicorn. You know, that'll probably pay out for my entire fund. But you can't build a fund with that thinking that every one of them will be a unicorn, okay? Or they will be a unicorn. So you need to have a very grounded expectation, saying on an average, I want a 3x to 5x return. And in today's market, a 3x to 5x return for a fund is actually a pretty darn good thing. Right?
Okay. But ma'am, in the startup journey, entrepreneur also come across at the stage where they need to scale the company, or they need to give the exit to their investor. So how to decide at what time you need to sell your company and to whom?
Right. So most entrepreneurs do something. I remember, you know, early on in my life when I ran my own M&A advisory, many young companies would come to me and say, Sushma, look, I'm not going to sell, but I still need to go out and assess what I'm worth. Okay. I still remember a company out of New Jersey. I won't name the name. It was an SAP consulting company. And who, you know, they ran a very successful SAP company. They came to us and we got them a deal for $40 million when they were about a $20 million company. At that time, he said, no, you know, I want to sell for $80 million. 1.5 years down the road, we got them an offer for $80 million. He wanted to sell north of $100 million. Okay, so you know, a lot of entrepreneurs, this is a moving target. Okay, and which is fine. I mean, you've built something. I mean, and you want to get the best value out of it. But here's what I tell people. And this is my rule of 3 Ps, okay? You either sell on a promise, okay? Selling on a promise means you've proven your concept. People say, wow, this is a damn good company, okay? I think there's going to be tremendous amount of potential in this company. So you're either selling on promise or potential. And you can see this routinely in the world of pharmaceuticals. You know, somebody goes, they do it, you know, they come up with the drug, and before it's even commercialized, somebody will come and pick them up, because the synergy of having them in their portfolio is extremely good for a Pfizer or an AstraZeneca or something like that. Same thing for a technology company, okay? Saying this technology in the hands of Microsoft or in the hands of an SAP or an Oracle is going to do miracles, or in the hands of Accenture, you know. So you see a lot of examples. So you're selling on promise or potential, where you have momentum, but that momentum is just beginning, and people are saying, well, this momentum is going to carry me through, and hence they go, and people may pay a premium for that, okay? Or you sell on profit, where it's a very proven model. Things are working so well, like a well-oiled machine. You're selling on profit, but there is still potential. Example, you could be a company that is, selling to the high-tech sector, and you're selling to the high-tech sector in the United States. An acquirer maybe a very strong UK company that is looking for access to the US market, but also believe that your product could sell extremely well in UK, right? And you're a profitable company, and synergistically, I can make 2 + 2 into 22. So you're selling on profits.
Okay.
But you never sell, I can't say never sell, but if you sell when you have peaked, then you're not capitalizing on the market or the market potential or the premium, okay? Because when you have peaked, people are not going to pay you full premium. They're going to discount you, okay? Saying, well, from here on, it's going to be down, but I still think I can buy it, right? So my rule of 3 Ps is sell on profit, sell on promise, and sell before you peak.
Okay. That's really a great insight about how to sell a company. With this, we come to the end of this wonderful episode. Thank you so much for speaking with me on the Icebug Show. I feel that your 4 C's of leadership that you shared in the previous episodes are applicable to everyone who want to make an impact on the society. Moreover, your insights are helpful for entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs. It will take them one step closer to their goal. And ma'am, finally, you have been most helpful, and I would like to invite you to have more episodes with you on the Icebug Show.
Thank you, Saurabh. It's been a pleasure to be on your episode, and I agree. Clarity and courage of conviction, they feed on each other in order to make you very, very successful.
Yeah, that's true, ma'am. So thank you so much for this episode, and I hope that you will come back again, and we'll also share more insight about startup ecosystem and also about how to become successful in our life. So I'm hoping for that.
Absolutely, Saurabh. Anytime, happy to impart what little life lessons I have learned, and if it can help people, and if it can help people reduce their mistakes or even to motivate them, I'm happy to.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Cheers.